So it looks like we've got a good number of folks who have joined the call now, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Jessie Hermann. I am the Director of Programs and Community Outreach for the World Affairs Council of Charlotte, and thank you all for joining us today. This is the kickoff of our fall programming for our young professionals of the World Affairs Council. We are a group of about 21 to 40-ish year olds who are really working to make Charlotte a more global city, to learn more about the cultures that are around us here in this city, but also to become better global citizens, learning about foreign policy, international trade, and different cultural aspects of the world around us and how we can be better global citizens. So we do have some really exciting programs coming up this fall, including an international graduate school workshop that will cover both how do I study something that's internationally related and also how do I get an international degree abroad. We will also be having an Indigenous Peoples Day event, a Thai cooking class with Chef Alyssa's Kitchen, a global trivia night, some speaker spotlights, and a lot of really, really interesting things coming up for a variety of what you're interested in. If you do not already receive our emails, you can sign up for that. My colleague Noah Amaris will be putting that sign up link in the chat box if you are interested. So for today's program, it's probably going to be one of the most informal World Affairs Council's programs you've seen. There's really no prepared remarks. We are just going to start with a brief introduction, and then we'll pretty much open it for questions. I've got a few ready to go, but at any time you can submit your questions. If you hover your mouse over the screen, there will be a toolbar at the bottom of Zoom. Just click on Q&A and submit your question. As long as there is nothing profane, we will pretty much be asking and answering any questions you submit. With that caveat, the World Affairs Council of Charlotte is a nonpartisan organization. We firmly believe in dialogue across the entire political spectrum, and our mission is really to promote that dialogue and learn from people who might think differently than us and educate ourselves on different topics. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ambassador Pearson to tell us a little bit about himself, his journey, and then we'll get started with the questions.
Okay, Jessica, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be with all of you tonight, digitally and virtually in any case. And I'm really happy to have a chance to talk to you about whatever interests you in foreign affairs and international affairs and U.S. policy overseas. So let me just say that I joined the Foreign Service in 1976. My wife and I had tours in New Zealand and then in Beijing, China. We also had tours in Brussels 2 times at NATO. A tour in Paris, France for 3 years, and then a tour in Ankara, Turkey for 3 years. And stateside, I served on the National Security Council. I served in the State Department's Operations Center, our 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365 days a year center for coordinating and retrieving messages from around the world, because of course we're in business 24 hours a day, all year round. And I was then Director General of the Foreign Service at the end of my career, and I had a chance to oversee the recruitment and promotion and evaluation of our employees around the world, and also had an informal responsibility to speak up for the Foreign Service officers to the hierarchy of the State Department and to the U.S. government. So all of those were great assignments and a wonderful 30-year career in the Foreign Service, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions and listening to your thoughts.
Great. So you are just a little bit hard to hear. If you wouldn't mind speaking up just a little bit or moving closer to the computer,
Okay,
please.
I will. I'll move it in closer and speak a little bit louder. Thank you.
Great. So right now we've got 2 different types of questions, Foreign Service Ambassadorial and Foreign Policy. So let's start with just kind of the softball. How do I become an ambassador?
Well, you need a lot of luck and some talent. And so I would say that actually Foreign Service officers, we all say, should not expect to become ambassadors because there aren't that many ambassadors at any one time, and it's not a predictable course. So in my case, I was lucky enough to work for some great people. I worked for a guy named Richard Holbrooke, who was the negotiator for the accords that ended the Balkan Wars. the Dayton Accords. He was a wonderful guy. He helped with my career. I worked for Secretary of State Colin Powell. I worked for Secretary of State Jim Baker. I worked for George Shultz, another Secretary of State. I worked for Madeleine Albright. So I was lucky enough to have jobs that brought me into a profile, and so they recommended me for assignments, and I was lucky enough to get the assignment to Turkey at a critical time, and felt very fortunate to do so. But really, even without a title of ambassador, it's an exciting life. It's a wonderful life. It has its difficulties and its challenges, but I wouldn't say I would predict if there is a path to being an ambassador for anybody.
So when you received your assignment to Turkey, what was your main goal of that ambassadorial post?
Well, my main goal when I went to Turkey was to help Turkey reach the upper levels of membership in the global economic listings. They were about 16th in the world, and I felt that with American help, we could bring them up to the top 10, or at least try. And but unfortunately, the Turkish management of their currency and management of their economy actually created a crisis, which plunged them into a very difficult economic circumstance. And the other goal was really to manage a client that we share a lot of interest with historically, and we were close allies in the Korean War and for the NATO period thereafter. But there are differences, and significant differences, between the U.S. and Turkey, which have never been truly resolved. And I was there to try to help accomplish those kinds of tasks as well.
Okay, great. So shifting a little into policy here, is there any chance that Cyprus will ever be united?
You know, when we look at these situations around the world from a diplomatic standpoint, one of the things you look to as a positive is that people are not shooting at each other. And so part of the process of diplomacy is to get people to the point where they are not shooting at each other. You think about how long it's taken us to help resolve the situation in Northern Ireland. There's still very strong feelings there on both sides, but people are not involved in violence against each other. Look at the end of apartheid in South Africa and the reconciliation process that the two parties, the sides, the black South Africans and the white South Africans had to go through. So if you can take the violence out of a circumstance, you have an opportunity to eventually make peace. Now, the difficulty is that Cyprus itself is a member of the European Union, and the Republic of Northern Cyprus, which is only recognized by Turkey, is not. And so this involves a lot of negotiations over time between Turkey and the European Union, and there's been a recent flare-up, of course, over energy issues in the Eastern Mediterranean because of this. But without violence, you have time and you have opportunities to see where you might be able to make progress. So to a diplomat, I doubt a diplomat would ever say never. So I will say one day in the future, I'm confident that this kind of issue can be resolved.
I like that a diplomat never says never. That's good. So being a diplomat, serving as an ambassador, you pretty much always have to kind of go in line with what the administration is saying at the time, with their political platforms and stances. So what do you do when you disagree, when you have a personal difference of political opinion with what the administration is asking you to promote?
Well, I'll give you a concrete example. When my wife Maggie and I were in Paris, she was the public affairs officer for the embassy, and I was the number 2, the deputy chief of mission. And that was the period when Monsanto decided to promote a worldwide campaign to have GMOs accepted and grown everywhere. And Monsanto wanted to break into the European market so that the European farmers would grow GMO crops. And we knew, really, because we had experience in France on this issue, we knew that France was not interested in agreeing to this in any way. But we took the instruction and we went to the our French colleagues, and we told them that this was the request from Washington, and that we would like to ask them to take some time and give us a considered response, which we would be very happy to pass back to Washington. And they did, and they gave us a considered response, and the considered response was no. And so we sent our response back to Washington saying that we had discussed this thoroughly with the French, and that their position was well known and set from the president through the prime minister, through the parliament, through the business community, through the agricultural community, and that we did not see any prospect of France agreeing to the Monsanto initiative. So there's a good example of taking the instruction as an objective request, not trying to force someone to give you the answer you want, but use the answer that you get to try to help frame the discussion about the larger issue, which is how to grow, how to have the kind of agricultural growth the world needs, and that's what we tried to do. So I think that's a good example of how you can use an instruction that you know may not be successful. If you have an instruction that you don't like, you can still say, and I have said, here's what Washington would like to do. But I need to hear what your response is. I need to hear what you're thinking about in order to reply to this. And so by depersonalizing it and making it an object of discussion, it's possible to put very contentious issues on the table. LGBT rights in Saudi Arabia, for example. We had a tough time with the Turks over child trafficking because of the outflow of and recruitment by these syndicates in Eastern Europe and in Russia of the young Russian women and Eastern European women, promising them jobs as maids or clerks or some other category. And we went to the Turks and we had several difficult conversations with them because they didn't see it was a problem. But in the end, they were able to take some measures, which we applauded. Among other things, we pointed out that the Romanian orphanages were selling young girls to these syndicates. So that convinced the Turks that this was a serious problem and that they had to do something about it as well.
Great. So jumping into the political side here, is Erdogan really a religious zealot, or is it just a case of populism and numbers for him?
Well, he is not actually as religiously devoted as some of the other people in his party. He is first and foremost a politician, a Turkish patriot in his own view. He is a devout Muslim, but he is not really that interested in the religious aspects so much as he is in the political consequences and advantages of being religiously motivated. And he has taken measures in Turkey to actually control and deprive the religious groups in Turkey who've been prominent of various rights and access they have in the country. So he's treated them basically as another political force to be dealt with. And it's not relevant to try to talk too much about his religious convictions, since he is really focused on using the religion of Islam to maintain and to further his political position.
All right, and rolling on the Erdogan train here, Were you able to predict that he would rise to the dominant leader of Turkey back when you were in service? And did you ever have to do any kind of assessment, or what were the State Department's feelings about him at the time?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. And the truth is that we knew he was a rising star. He had been mayor of Istanbul, and he had been a pretty good mayor. He was a fairly popular mayor of Istanbul. And he had also gotten in trouble with the secular government by reciting a poem in which he referred to the mosque. He said the spires were their swords, our swords, he said, and the domes are our shields. And so he spent about 4 or 5 months in prison as a result of that. So he was already an opposition figure with a reputation, and he was already a charismatic figure because of his tenure as mayor of Istanbul. But when they ran for national office the first time and succeeded in 2002, their program was quite liberal. They promised to enter the European Union with liberal ideas. They promised civilian control of the military. They wanted to improve the participation of women in the society. And they drew a large number of supporters from otherwise liberal groups who were despondent over the track record of the previous governments. And then he began to change. And it's an open question whether he changed because of disappointments he ran into. He tried several ventures with the Israelis. They didn't give him the kind of respect that he thought he deserved. He tried to dictate terms to the European Union, and they weren't accepting the terms he dictated. And so some people think it's the result of his frustrations that drove him to this more conservative path. And others are convinced that from day one, he had this conservative path in mind, and he just played tactically along the way to reach the point where he is today.
Great. And now shifting to foreign service a little bit more, do you feel that your education background prepared you for life in the foreign service and as an ambassador? And can you talk a little bit about the difference between quantitative and qualitative skills that you were able to use during that time?
Yes, I do think my educational background helped me, but it was what I wanted to do anyway. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I was a major in political science. I had a minor in economics. I had a minor in French because I spent 6 months at Vanderbilt in France in 1964. I will say that from an educational standpoint, and I had gone to law school at UVA, and so I always loved negotiating, and I loved trying to solve problems with discussion. But I also had been caught up in the civil rights struggle in the 60s. John Lewis was being arrested at sit-ins in Nashville while I was a student a few blocks away at Vanderbilt. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and then ultimately the assassination of King. All of those had a profound moral impact on me. And we were at that time in the middle of the Vietnam War, and the country was being split. And I know that some of my friends went to military service, as I did. I joined the Navy, and some of them were in the Army and went directly into combat. And others of my friends went directly from Charlottesville to Washington to help people who were burning their draft cards get out of jail and defend their cases. And later on in NATO, I met a really terrific guy, Canadian diplomat, who had been, of course, born in the United States and went to Canada during the war and changed his citizenship. So this cumulative impact culturally, I will say, really convinced me that along with my natural feeling about negotiations and discussions, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to spend my life trying to get people to solve problems without violence. And in addition to that, I loved languages. I was very curious about other cultures. And so it made for me a perfect kind of combination. But that it wasn't really an academic planning for the Foreign Service. There were a lot of things going on in our country at the time that kind of brought me to that point of making a decision about joining the Foreign Service.
Great. And specifically from the State Department perspective, how important are those harder science, quantitative skills like political science, or rather than political science, but instead data, computer science, and economics?
Well, I would say that in the Foreign Service, we're all really trained to be generalists. So in every post where I had a position of responsibility, such as number 2 or as ambassador, I worked very hard with the U.S. business sector to try to expand business opportunities in that country. And so understanding the economics of a country was just as critical as understanding the politics of the country. I think during the Cold War, the political and national security aspects of a relationship took on more importance. But after the Cold War, I'll say from 1990 on, the economic aspects of relationships have been progressively more important. And we see all of that in play around us now. The rise of globalization, supply chains that are, in our case, made us very dependent on a country thousands of miles away for ordinary aspects of our lives. Things like that. Next door, a good friend of mine, Tony Wayne, was the last ambassador in Mexico City. And so he's been doing a lot of commentary on the new U.S. MCA deal, the new NAFTA. And so I would say those are very important. But honestly, during the time that I was active in the Foreign Service, computer skills were not nearly as important as perhaps they are today. The chief skills in our service at the time, and which I think are probably still primary skills, are to be able to speak persuasively and write persuasively. Foreign Service puts an oversized emphasis on the ability to write, because the cables we write go to a number of government agencies. They go to people you'll never meet. And so the objective is to try to put in that text the things that would persuade the people who are reading it that your position is sound and that they would support it.
Great. I was a intern at the State Department and have to say that my writing skills were completely just overtaken and improved during that time. I received so many edits back and they'd say, cut it by half, do it again, do it again. And it definitely truly made me a stronger writer. So definitely second that part. It's no secret that the U.S. diplomatic corps has faced a number of significant setbacks in the past few years, between ambassadorial postings not being filled, slashed budgets. What do you see as the biggest threat to the Foreign Service right now?
Well, the biggest threat is that it will be hollowed out as an institution. It has not been under this kind of threat since the 1950s, when Senator McCarthy of Wisconsin accused State Department officers of being communist spies, and no one stopped him until he made his own mistakes. So President Eisenhower didn't stop him. No one stopped him. So a good number of Foreign Service officers left the department over harassment without any foundation in fact. And the current issue is that if the State Department is not absolutely relevant to what decisions are made in Washington about events in the world, then the country suffers. And one of the things that worries all of us, myself and my colleagues, is an abandonment of leadership by the United States that we had built with a lot of hard work and energy over 75 years, and to turn it into a kind of competitive Coliseum match against any foe and all foes, really has undermined our influence in the world. So I think the State Department is quite resilient, but the people I know are really hoping that there will be a chance for them to play the role again that I think our country wants them to play, and which their education and their experience has prepared them to play.
So do you see a way out of where we are now? And how long do you think that it might take for the US to regain its leading position in international and multilateral affairs?
Got it. Well, I think that honestly, it really depends on what happens in November. I think that if President Trump wins re-election, he's not shown much interest in the State Department's skills. He's attacked our diplomats for telling the truth. And he has attacked them for pointing out ethical failures and possible even violations of American law. So I don't see a bright future ahead if he is reelected for the Foreign Service. And you know, we think of it as a group of people, and it is a group of people. Altogether, all of us, the generalists we call it, are only 8,000 people. So we're less than 20% of the population of Chapel Hill. So but they represent a collective reservoir of experience and insight and knowledge of cultures and knowledge of languages that is really indispensable to the conduct of a good diplomacy. So if we get a chance to start anew, then there are several studies underway, one at Harvard, others around the country. At Duke, we're doing a Rethinking Diplomacy project to try to help diplomats and scientists work better together to accomplish the policy ends that both support. So there's a real opportunity for things that might change if the environment allows us, but we'll just have to wait and see what the election outcome is.
Great. So it's 2020. It's been 4 years since the attempted coup in 2016 in Turkey. What have been the ripple effects from that?
Oh, I think that the most important effect has been that Mr. Erdogan is self-convinced that he was miraculously saved, and that and as a result, he has gained ever more influence in Turkey. But he gained so much influence that he decided to change the constitutional system so that he would be essentially the only decision maker. His constitution allows him to dominate the legislature. With political power, he's dominated the media. The judiciary is cowed. The military is now fragmented and under his strict control. And it's quite clear that he makes every decision of significance. He is also bound to a far-right party that more or less has drawn the red lines for his government with respect to the policy against the Kurds, for example. That's one of the reasons for Turkey's aggression in northern Syria. And he is suffering at the polls. He's suffering in public opinion. The economy is weak. Inflation is up. Unemployment is up. And young people in Turkey are more interested now in what happens to their economic future than they are in the outcome of an Islamic secular competition within the country. He's tried a number of foreign adventures. He has an army in northeastern Turkey, in northeastern Syria, excuse me. He has an army in northwestern Syria. He has an army now in Libya. He has bases on the Red Sea, the Persian Gulf, Somalia, now in Libya, and of course the traditional Turkish presence in the Black Sea. So he has a military presence on every water avenue in and out of the Middle East, and no other country has that. to his grand ambitions, but he has not been successful. And the Arab states in the Middle East don't really want Turkish supervision, and they don't want Turkish influence. And he tries to increase his own influence by using the Islamic card. He's a Muslim Brotherhood supporter, but the UAE, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, even Jordan, really are not interested in having a Turkish schoolmarm to tell them how to run their business.
Interesting. So in terms of access, as an ambassador, how aware are you of CIA activities in the country? And do you get any special access to covert actions as an ambassador? And I suppose a good question to end that with is, do you keep your security clearance after you're done?
I'll start with the last one. I did not keep my security clearances. I don't want to know something I don't need to know. And so I was very happy to really let my security clearances go, because when I had them, I needed to know the information that I had and could use. And the intelligence function of the State Department and the CIA and the National Intelligence Agencies was superb and critical to just about everything that we were able to accomplish. So I, as ambassador, had presidential authority to be briefed and to understand what the CIA operations were in the country, and they were responsible for reporting to me. But I did this with a loose hand. I did not want to know the covert operations that they were operating unless there was an operational need for me to know that in the political realm. And when something very important might come up, as did on several occasions, the head of the CIA station in my embassy came to me and briefed me on what they were doing and why they were doing it and what they had in mind. And so I felt fully informed. So my experience with the agency was that they were wonderful partners in China. They were wonderful partners in Brussels, in Paris, and in Turkey.
So we've also got quite a few questions on Turkey's involvement in the Libyan conflict.
Okay.
Can you explain what's happening there and if you think that will impact Turkey's relationship with the United States?
It definitely is going to impact the Turkish relationship with the United States. Overall, the United States supports the UN recognized government in Tripoli, but its position is to have the parties pull back from violent action, and to solve this problem. It may take quite a while because Libya is terribly fragmented, but to solve this problem at the negotiating table over time. So I think that Mr. Erdogan saw a chance to make a play in Libya that would give him a base farther west in the Mediterranean. It would also give him a claim with Libya on the seabed of the Mediterranean, which they have done, a claim that directly conflicts with claims by Greece, and that means the European Union, and by Egypt. So what Mr. Erdogan does is he uses aggressive political and military moves to gain influence so that he can improve his bargaining position. And one of the reasons he does that is because he has a very weak economy. If he could give, let's pick an example, if he could give $1 billion to the Palestinian Authority, then the Palestinian Authority and Turkey would have a leverage over some of the discussions going on in the Middle East. But he doesn't have that $1 billion. And if he could engage in negotiations with other countries about access to the oil and gas, mainly gas, resources in the Mediterranean, and he had a large economic reserve to invest, then he would be able to sit down at the table and do that. He doesn't have that reserve. He doesn't have those means. And so he's, in his own mind, the only way he can get a better bargaining position is with these very aggressive acts of exploring in waters that belong to the Republic of Cyprus, in challenging the sovereignty of the economic zone for the islands that Greece has in the Aegean, and so that's his methodology. But it isn't a methodology with a solution, because none of the other countries are going to accept his unilateral demands. And they're not going to accept them not only today, but they're not going to accept them tomorrow. And he has no reason whatsoever to go to war. So he is engaging in a high stakes game of military and political bluff to try to get people to come his way. He's been stymied in Libya precisely because there is an international coalition that backs the opposition general, General Haftar or Hifter, based on your pronunciation. And that coalition backing the opposition general consists of the French, who have important gas and oil resources in eastern Libya, the Russians, who want a base and an influence farther west in the Mediterranean too, since they have now a very substantial position in Syria, and Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates. So this problem is not going to be solved at the point of a gun, and whether he can succeed in a negotiation by deciding how the final deal will be shaped is highly problematic for him.
So I know you just touched on this, but we do have...
I can't quite hear you, Jessica. Now you couldn't hear me, and now I can't hear you.
All right, how's this?
That's much better, thank you.
Great. We have a question specifically about the Turkey-Greece dispute in the Aegean. With the removal of pro-NATO and pro-West leadership forces, do you see a greater danger of escalation there?
I think with Greece and Turkey, there's always a flashpoint. And that's why it draws so much attention, because Turkish jets have been overflying Greek territory. This is a typical kind of move that Turkey has used in the past to intimidate Greece. Turkey has Turkey has laid claim, hypothetically. I'm going to call it hypothetically because it's never been formally made as a claim, but Mr. Erdogan, as far back as 2016, maybe 2017, said that the treaty with Greece, the so-called the Lausanne Treaty, had to be renegotiated, that Turkey gave up territories that it should not have given up, and that treaty should not include as territorial claims all the waters around the Greek islands in the Aegean. What Greece has going for it, of course, is that it's a member of the European Union. It is also a member of NATO. So the US, which last week was conducting exercises with the Turkish Navy, was exercising with the Greek Navy a few weeks before then. So the American position is obviously to try to calm matters down so that there can be discussions. But Turkey has now opened up, I'll say, 3 or 4 tables of negotiations without a commanding influence on the outcome. The one with the Greeks, the one with the Egyptians, the concern within NATO about the Greek-Turkish conflict, and other than saying what Turkey is determined to do and that they're not backing down and that sort of thing, he really doesn't have a lot of leverage. But he is a guy who depends on his ability to create a disturbance and to take advantage of it if he can. And I'm sure that he will continue to do that.
So we've got a few questions specifically about individuals' experiences and hopes joining the Foreign Service. And I'm going to take just a quick moment to plug the Mid-Atlantic Diplomat in Residence, who I believe you can find on Google. Just Google her right now. It's Catherine Crockert. I believe she's leaving her posting at the end of this summer. Who would be happy to help you talk about your specific backgrounds, ways to join the Foreign Service, give an overview. You can also check our Young Professionals YouTube page, and we've got a workshop with her as well, an hour and a half, anything you could want to know about joining the Foreign Service. And in regards to the specific question we have about opportunities for older Americans, you can apply to be a Foreign Service officer up to the age of 59, and I believe it's a max retirement of 65.
Yes, that's exactly right. And the reason it's 59 is because we want someone who joins the Foreign Service to be able to have their pension vested before they have to retire. So it takes that long for the pension to be vested. At least that was the case when I was Director General. And so that was the only reason why that number was picked. So we actually recruit and welcome people at all ages to apply for the Foreign Service. One of my good friends is Charles Ray. Charlie spent 20 years as an officer in the U.S. Army. He retired from the Army, he joined the Foreign Service, and he was, among other things, ambassador to Cambodia. So we have lots of people who come in at mid-career, people who've had military service, or people who just decide that this is the thing they want to do. And so there's no age issue here. And the one thing that can make a difference is that we are required to agree to worldwide service. That means service anywhere. So the medical exam sometimes is rather rigorous. Medical facilities are better now than they have been ever before, and medical services for our people are better now than they ever have been before. But that worldwide service commitment can restrict the number of posts that someone could go to. We have a lot of people who go to hardship posts. We have a lot of people who go to danger zones, and we expect everybody to take their turn.
So speaking of worldwide availability and commitment, what areas of the world have the most presence of the U.S. Foreign Service?
As the most presence?
Yes.
Well, that too, it's a very interesting question. In the days before the Cold War ended, there was an overabundance of presence in Europe and other sort of major capitals that you would easily remember around the world. But when I was Director General, one of the things I did, because the Cold War was ending, is I started a shift from that more or less Eurocentric approach of the Foreign Service, because during the Cold War with NATO and all that sort of thing, there was a lot of interest, and with Russia, there was a lot of focus on that kind of expertise. So I'll just give you one short story. I went to Moscow in 2005, and I noted that they had, say, 25 political officers and economic officers, and they were all well trained, they were superb individuals and so on. And at that time, Russia, of course, was in a state of economic collapse. So I asked them if they knew what the population of, what the GNP of Russia was in 2005. And it was the size of Spain's GNP. I asked them what the population of Nigeria was. It was greater than the population of Russia. I asked them how many people I had, did they know how many people I had in Nigeria to look after the political and economic affairs of the country. I had 6, I said. And I asked them about the consular district at that time of Calcutta. And I asked them if they knew what the population of that consular district, just one portion of India, was. And someone did know. It was 290 million people. So I said, so how many people do you think the State Department has in Calcutta to look after the economic and political affairs of that consular district? one person, one person. So I started a shift of resources and training and language training and assignments and hardship posts and all the rest to the world that was coming, the world we called the developing world at that time, because the rise of the South was evident, the rise of the global South was evident to us. And if you're a company, you better have your assets where your business is. So I think we've done a good job in moving that way. And we have more to do. Now there's great interest in Chinese, and there's great interest in the South Asian languages, there's great interest in the African languages. There's we're making that kinds of move, but those kinds of moves, excuse me. But it takes time, and it takes training, and I'm happy to say I think we're doing a pretty good job now, but we have things we still have to do.
So I'm going to leave this one a little open for your interpretation here. What are your thoughts on political appointees in the Foreign Service?
Well, I worked for one political appointee who was a gem. He had grown up in Europe. He had been educated in France as a child. He fled France because he was Jewish when the Germans invaded in World War II. He was a financier in New York. His name was Felix Rohatyn. Came back to Paris as ambassador, and I was his number two, his deputy chief of mission. He was superb. He was superb. And in that sense, he could pick up the phone and call anyone in the U.S. government, and they would take his call, and he would explain the problem. And because of his influence, he and I were able to get a lot of things done. I worked for another ambassador who was very jealous of the skills of other people in the embassy, disruptive, poor personal relations, and he made life difficult for everybody in the embassy. And I was also the deputy chief of mission there, and I had to intercede often between the ambassador and my colleagues in the staff. And so that's not something that we would have encountered probably with a professional Foreign Service officer. Political ambassadors often go to the cushiest post, and they enjoy the prestige, and they enjoy the social access that they have in those countries. And many of them depend on the Foreign Service for advice and counsel, and there's a wonderful partnership. Some of them, and those some become exceptions because we all eventually learn about them, really don't make good use of the personnel, and they don't make good use of the embassy, and they use the embassy for purposes that are perhaps unethical or even illegal. If I were, I'll finish it. If I could, I would say 10% of our ambassadors overseas could easily be political. They would take prestigious positions and be supported by a strong staff and receive good indoctrination and orientation before they left, and that would be fine. But we're the only service in the world with over 30 or 35% of our ambassadors being political friends of the president.
Right. And a very similar question. Do host governments treat ambassadors different from if they're from the career Foreign Service or a political appointee?
Well, I think that the business of diplomacy is to get along and make progress. So I'm sure that all governments try to deal with political ambassadors in a way that increases the influence that those governments might have in Washington. So they don't pick fights themselves with those ambassadors. The ambassadors, as I see, sometimes pick fights with their host government, but I would say in those kinds of cases, there's a great deal more attention in the foreign ministry, in the economics ministry, in the finance ministry, treasuries, and so on, in getting to know the people at the lower levels in the embassy so that they can understand what they see as going on in the United States and what the possibilities are. So I think there are probably a lot more conversations going on at that level if you're working with a political ambassador who's difficult to deal with.
Great. So we've got a Turkey-specific question here. Could the potential extradition of Fethullah Gulen to Turkey improve our relations? And is it possible? Is it likely to happen?
Well, you're asking some really good questions here. There is an extradition treaty between Turkey and the United States, and it governs the crimes and the evidence required for there to be an extradition. So one of the first things the United States said to Turkey was that the extradition treaty governs this relationship. And yet Turkey, it appears, tried several times to have this treated as a political gesture, that the United States would simply allow someone living in the United States to be sent back to Turkey without examining what the requirements were in the extradition treaty. And for any lawyers out there, it requires something like the amount of evidence that would be necessary for an indictment. It can't be a suspicion. There has to be real evidence. The Turks provided a number of boxes of documents to the United States, but none of them in any document tied Mr. Gulen to the coup in 2016. And so there was no basis proven for the application of the extradition treaty. So I think that the Turks don't necessarily accept that, but they do understand that now in a way that they didn't in the beginning. And some of the evidence that was submitted was just flawed badly. Confessions by people on videotape with deep bruises on their faces. And so the issue now, I think, has receded in importance for the United States. The Turks make use of it whenever they want to attack the U.S., but I think unless there's some dramatic change, it's highly unlikely that the Turks will get Mr. Gulen through the extradition treaty.
So with all of your vast experience in the Foreign Service, if you could go back in time, what would you tell your newly minted diplomatic self?
Well, you know, I confess that I never talked to a single Foreign Service officer before I joined the Foreign Service. So Maggie and I laugh about this. I think that both of us came in because we both felt confident that we could do this work. And we had, Maggie had a master's degree in American Studies, one of the first degrees in American Studies that were granted in the United States, which prepared her superbly to be a public affairs, public diplomacy officer. And I had spent time in France, and I had been in the Navy, and I'd served in Japan, and I had a lot of exposure with the world. So I would say that, contrary to what happened to me, it would be nice to talk to a Foreign Service officer before you decide to enter the Foreign Service. And the combination, though, is an intellectual interest, of course, in international affairs and a pretty good working knowledge. I mentioned the ability to present orally good arguments and text write very well, kind of cultural curiosity about the world so that you feel comfortable working in foreign cultures, and frankly, a sense of adventure, because what happens to you in your life in the Foreign Service is not going to be predictable. Some of it is not good, but it is not predictable. And so you have to have a willingness to take that much of a risk to be in the Foreign Service and to have that life as a representative of the United States. But I sadly did not prepare by talking to any Foreign Service officer at all before I joined the service. except the examiners, of course. They were the only people I talked to.
I guess it worked out for you.
Worked out.
We actually have a lot of retired Foreign Service officers within the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. For those of you that are attending and are interested, shoot us an email. We'll be happy to connect you with some of our members. And also for the questions of those of you asking if this recording will be available, it will. By the end of the week, you'll be able to find it on our social media, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and the World Affairs Council website and YouTube channel, also our email list. So you'll be bombarded with it, don't worry. So can you tell us, Ambassador, about a time when you faced a big crisis and what specifically your role had to do in resolving it?
Yes, let me give you a couple of examples. I just got into Turkey in the fall of 2000, and there was a fierce political campaign going on in Southern California around Pasadena, where there's a large number of Armenian Americans. And the congressman who was running for re-election there introduced a resolution in the House of Representatives to condemn the Turks for the Armenian genocide of 1915 and thereafter. And this became, the Speaker of the House took this issue up, and he made it made a promise to have a vote on this. The House Foreign Affairs Committee had hearings. I went back to the hearings. Turks came to the hearings. They testified. It became quite a difficult issue in U.S.-Turkey relations. And as I mentioned, I'd just gotten there. So the night came when there was going to be the vote in the House of Representatives. And I had gone around both to the members of Congress and the Turks. The members of Congress, I said, look, I'm not denying what happened, but if you want to have a resolution that apologizes for slavery, please go ahead. If you want to have a resolution that regrets the treatment of Native Americans in our expansion west and our expansion across the continent, please go ahead. That's our business. That's what we should be doing. But should we really be telling another country what they should do about their history? In any case, the night came when the vote was going to be held, and Maggie and I were up at 2 a.m. and it looked like the vote was going to be to pass this resolution. And I knew the Turks would be very angry and would react. And so I said, well, I think we should just start packing our bags. And then an hour later, I got a call from Washington that said at the last minute, the resolution had been withdrawn. So those 3 or 4 hours waiting for what we thought was going to be the possible end to my diplomatic career in Turkey were one of the moments that I remember. And on the good side, in I think it was February of 2001, Turkey had a severe economic crisis. The U.S. Treasury had a plan for how Turkey could stabilize its currency. It was economically very sound, but the Turks had a plan that was politically acceptable, and the Treasury plan was not really acceptable. And the speculators got in the space between the political idea and the economic idea, and they caused the lira, the Turkish currency, to crash. It lost 40% of its value in one afternoon. I called the Prime Minister's office to try to give them my impression of what they could do, but they decided not to follow my advice. And so the Turkish lira collapsed and the economy was in a terrible state. And I tried to see if I could find a loan from the United States or from some other institution that would help Turkey get back on its feet. The Treasury was adamantly opposed. They wouldn't clear off on the instructions for me to make that offer to the Turks. So the Turkish economic minister was a very good friend of mine. And I asked him if he happened to know the director of the International Monetary Fund. He said he did, and she was a good friend. I said, well, do you think it might be possible for her to invite me to lunch? And he said, I think it would be. And so she invited me to lunch, and I took along the Treasury note taker so that he would hear everything I said. And I laid out the case why $1 billion or 4 or 5 billion, I think it was $5 billion we settled on. would be enough to show American confidence in the Turkish economy, and the Turkish economy could start on its way back, and they would follow a strict IMF program in doing so. And so we got the money. And so I think that's one of the proudest moments of my tenure in Turkey was my small part in getting the Turkish economy turned around, and they tripled their GNP in about 6 years because of their enormous economic potential.
Great stories. Thanks for sharing those. I know we are right at 7 o'clock here, but we've got 2 more really good questions if we squeeze them in there.
Sure.
So of course, I'll give you a very complex question to start. In your opinion, does the United Nations have an effective role in international diplomacy?
Only if the countries that make up the Security Council and the Perm 5 want to make it so. I think at the level of managing international political and security issues, it does help in the sense of making sure that we get to discuss problems and bring them up and prevent them from being just bilateral or regional or kept away from global discussion. So I think it helps, but it doesn't do the diplomacy because of the difficulty of getting the Perm 5, China, Russia, France, UK, and US to agree on policies. At the lower level, for example, at the UN Development Program, they do a lot of wonderful work. Other institutions, WHO used to be do a lot of wonderful work too, and there are a lot of institutions. Peacekeeping is not a enterprise that wins a lot of laurels, but it does tend to keep people from fighting with one another, and it does tend to provide a level of stability and security in countries where the UN peacekeepers are present and properly managed, because sometimes they are not. So I think the world would be poorer without the United Nations. It could be better if it did work better. For me, the worst example of the failure of the United Nations is in the Human Rights Committee, where people who make a joke of human rights have a seat and even try to exercise a leadership role in the committee, mainly to block any efforts to improve the human rights conditions in their countries. So I wouldn't toss the UN out. I would just make better use of it. And I think that one of the post-COVID challenges for the whole world is whether we can or should revive some of these international institutions like the UN, like the G7, the G20, to do their jobs better. They've not done a very good job with COVID-19.
So for our last question, as we look to the future, I know we've got a lot of college students joining us on this call today. What would you tell them if they want to join the U.S. Foreign Service? What does that future look like for you? Is it still a viable option?
Yes, actually, to me, it's like the stock market. Buy low. And so now that the department is suffering with morale difficulties and its role is being affected by the administration, if I were a young person, I would join now. Because in 4 or 5 years, when the State Department turns around, that you will have that experience and you will have that understanding, and you will be at the top of the wave when things start moving forward. So I think actually that it's a good time to think about the Foreign Service, and I think it's a very good time to be part of what's likely to be a revival at some point. But I do think that the need to be engaged with the world in whatever capacity appeals to you, whether it's on the Hill, with the CIA, with USAID, with one of the international humanitarian charities. I worked with IREX for 6 years. They did wonderful work in 125 countries around the world. It's a great thing for Americans to be engaged in the world and to be engaged in solving problems in the world. And frankly, they need us and we need them. So I would make a strong pitch for finding a place to get started and get your feet in the water now.
What an encouraging way to end today's program. And for those of you who are interested in joining the Foreign Service, reach out to the World Affairs Council. We have programs like this 1 or 2 times a week. We have a young professionals group with a lot of Foreign Service education opportunities, study groups, test workshops. We're here to support you and serve as a resource for becoming a global citizen here from Charlotte. So Ambassador Pearson, thank you so much for your time today. It's always fantastic when we can hear an ambassadorial perspective of someone who is not currently serving. So we appreciate your candid answers and really learned a lot today. So thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you again soon, virtually or in person. Bye.